Alright, hey there everybody. This is Joseph Govey, Gyovai. And today I'm going to talk to you about holistic management. What is holistic management? How may it pertain to you and the decisions that you're making? And how does it pertain to us in New Mexico with the decisions that are being made around land management? Holistic management is a term that is well known by ranchers and land managers and was popularized by a man named Alan Savory and his wife Jody Butterfield, who wrote a book called Holistic Management, which I have here in front of me. And many people are familiar with this part, holistic management, but this is the really crucial part I want to talk to you about. What it says here is a new framework for decision making. Because what this book and this work is really about is creating a framework for making decisions to reach your goals. So, first, let's talk about this environment of New Mexico and some of the key components that are pointed out in the book, such as the brittle environment and the tool of rest. Savory and Butterfield categorize lands on a brittleness scale, which allows us to make a determination as to how we're going to manage lands. And what this says is that we can categorize lands on a brittleness scale from non-brittle, which is a wet environment, to very brittle, which is not just a dry, but it's also an environment that experiences long periods without any rain. So the reason that this term is used instead of fragile is that any ecosystem can be fragile, but the brittle environment becomes very dry. So after pointing out this distinction, what is said in the book is that the tool of rest does not work in a brittle environment. That is to say that when we leave land to grow back on its own, that's the tool of rest, to let it revitalize and replenish and let plants come back on their own. That's defined as rest. And what it is that rest absolutely works in a non-brittle environment. You cannot stop plants and animals from coming back. It's a natural phenomena of the succession of life. However, in brittle environments, this is not the case. The tool of rest often leads to further decline in the health of lands. And the key factor is that once lands are in a state of degradation in a brittle environment, they will continue to degrade if all inputs are removed, and primarily what we're speaking about is animals. So in these arid environments of the world, any arid environment is potentially a place that can become a desert. And the process is called desertification. So in these arid environments of the world, what has happened is that these lands originally were prairie lands, grasslands, herblands, forests, and the system was maintained by the herd and predator effect. So these are ruminant animals that moved as herds. They kept bunched together for their safety, and the predators kept them moving along. So in that fashion, ruminant animals, this would be typically bison, but cows, sheep, goats, the animals will eat more evenly. They will dung and urinate more evenly, and they'll also trample the ground quite aggressively and effectively when we're using them as herds in a tight bunch. So a key component of how this works is that as we implement this practice, we use our domesticated ruminant animals and we move them every day with us ourselves acting as the predators. And this can be done with temporary electric fencing. It can also be done with cowboys and cowgirls out there and their blue heeler pups, keeping the herd rounded up and moved every day and putting up night enclosures to keep the predators away. So there's a variety of ways this can be achieved, but the key distinction is that we're using ruminant animals as herds. What's currently being done in New Mexico is what's called set stocking rates, where your extension service or land management officer will come out with you to look at a piece of land. They'll measure out an area and they'll clip the seed heads of grass. They'll weigh out and measure the amount of forage that is present on a piece of land, and then they're going to tell you how many head of cattle or other animals you can sustain on that land. This is obviously based in some sound reasoned science, but the problem with that approach is that it's managing lands for the way that they are instead of managing lands for the way that we want them to be. And unfortunately, essentially all of the land in New Mexico is in a very severe state of degradation. So managing the land for the way that it is perpetuates that state of degradation. Managing the land for the way that we want it to be requires us to be able to envision what is possible. And we have some resources to look at, but not too many in New Mexico. There is an organization in Chihuahua, Mexico called Pasticultores del Desierto, where ranchers are using ruminant animals as herds in this fashion to bring back grasslands from hard pan Chihuahuan desert. And it's really amazing to see what they've accomplished. Of course, you can also check out what Alan Savory has done in Africa and the Savory Institute, and how they're using animals and have been very effective in replenishing watersheds and grasslands in Zimbabwe and in other countries in Africa. So here in New Mexico, the term holistic management is very well known by ranchers and livestock managers. But the practice is very under-implemented, and I fear that it's not very well understood. So as I say, the part that I want to talk to you about today is that holistic management is not a set system. It is a framework for decision making to reach your goals. Many people who are familiar with this term or have even extensive knowledge with holistic management will often refer to it as the Savory system. And the Savory system is not a real thing. What they're referring to is how you're going to move your animals. And there is no set system for that. There is no set system other than that we want to use the ruminant animals as a herd, and we want to keep them regularly moving. But the work is about making decisions to reach your goals and considering the whole in your decision making, considering all the people that are also responsible for making the decisions, considering the people that are affected by our decisions, and considering the impact on the environment of our decisions. So